Hi, hello, hi. This is going to be more of a ramble sort of video. I've written down some bullet points that I'm going to follow along with roughly, but it's going to be a video with less editing. I did originally record a live reaction to the Pokemon Presents, but I messed up the audio. This is a new mic, so hopefully things sound a bit better than they did. I know one of the biggest issues with my videos has always been the audio, but hopefully this mic takes care of that issue. But yeah, the audio messed up because not only is this a new mic that I'm not used to, but I've never recorded a video and my audio over the top of that. So when I came to the editing process, the audio of the Pokemon Presents was just so much louder than it. Anyway, my thoughts. First thing, the free starters are odd. We've got 2 Johto starters and then Tepig, which is Unova. I just find it odd that 2 are from Johto. Obviously they weren't going to do Cyndaquil again because they just did it for Pokemon Legends Arceus. Them choosing 2 starters from Johto just shows that there isn't a strict rule they're following. It doesn't have to be 1 starter from 3 different generations. I'm realistically going to go with Tepig just because I usually pick the fire starter, and I've always thought Tepig is really underrated. I think all 3 of these are probably going to get Mega Evolutions. I hope with 2 out of the 3 Johto starters being here as starters, it means that Cyndaquil is available to catch somewhere in the game, and I hope that if Chikorita and Totodile do get Mega Evolutions, that they give one to Cyndaquil too. I know it just got special treatment, but for me it's more I want it to get one not because I love Typhlosion, even though I do, but because I don't want one of the 3 starters to just have no Mega Evolution. Especially since if Typhlosion doesn't get one, and the other 2 do, it's going to be the only starter Pokemon from the first 3 generations without a Mega Evolution, and that would bother my OCD. I think this is a chance to give Meganium and Feraligatr a secondary type for their Mega Evolutions. With Meganium, I'd expect Grass Fairy, like most people seem to think. With Feraligatr, I don't know if it necessarily needs a second type, but I think Dark would work well. And for Embo, they could easily keep the firefighting, but they could easily swap that up, I don't mind. Next, it's all in one city. We already knew that after the initial reveal where we didn't really get to see anything, but this just further confirms it and shows just the scale of the city, and yeah, it does look massive. One of the main things we were wondering when we heard that information was how are they going to do wild Pokemon? But there's wild zones within the city that you can go to. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about these. They don't feel necessarily all that natural to the environment, but I'm hoping they're still fun to play around in and aren't too small and have a decent variety per zone. Let's talk about performance. It actually looks decent. It doesn't look like it's running at a ridiculous frame rate or anything. I wouldn't expect that from Pokemon. I'm glad it seems to be somewhat stable if this is running on the Switch 1 and there's been no modifications at all. If it's a stable 30 frames per second on the original Switch, then I'm okay with that as long as there aren't a bunch of game-breaking glitches. The visuals look decent. It looks like they're going with less realistic textures than Scarlet and Violet's, which hopefully will help the game's performance. It's very colourful, the colours look a lot more saturated than Scarlet and Violet's, and I actually quite like that. The lighting especially looks a lot better, and while the textures still aren't mind-blowing or anything, and I hear a lot of people compare it to Xenoblade, but I don't think Xenoblade is a good comparison for Pokemon. I know I wouldn't want like realistic grassy textures for Pokemon or realistic environments. For me, the ideal Pokemon game would look something like Genshin Impact, and I think this being a bright and colourful game works well for it. The textures aren't ridiculously high quality, and there are some visual things I'm not a huge fan of, but I think this is a fairly decent looking Pokemon game. This game seems to be set a few years after X and Y, where you're renovating the city. AZ has just been let off of all of his war crimes / crimes against humanity for some reason. It being set somewhat in the future makes me think there'll be some references to X and Y, so we know what happened to some of the characters, but I don't expect it to be heavily connected to those games, outside of us finally getting Zygarde actually being an important role in something, hopefully. Next note, Jet, the woman that the trailer gives a bit of focus to, is who I expect to be the villain. She just looks like she'll do a turn at the end of the game where she's like, "Wahaha, I'm the twist villain." The rival's gender seems to be dependent on your gender, which I'm kinda shocked about since they've not done that in years. I think maybe the last time they did that was in X and Y. We see a small amount of Zygarde, which is to be expected, but I'm hoping it has a somewhat big focus in the game. I'm not expecting it to be there constantly, but give us some lore about the Pokemon and have it be like the main legendary encounter. And I think that gives some justice to Zygarde that it's been missing out on for a decade. The trailer doesn't really show much of the catching mechanics, and that kinda scares me. The main thing that I loved about Legends Arceus was the catching, how you could strike a Pokemon in the back and it just felt good to do. It just felt nice catching Pokemon and running around. With this just being wild zones and not massive areas, I'm kinda concerned they're not going to focus much on the catching or the mobility of the trainer, and that does make me nervous. I mean, I've got that video where I 100%ed/perfected the Pokédex, and I'm kinda concerned about them not having tasks within the Pokédex since this isn't set in the past, and they might not need research like that on Pokemon since they know what Pokemon are at this point. I spoke of Xenoblade earlier. Well, for this one, it is actually similar to Xenoblade because the battle system is similar to Xenoblade here. Instead of being turn-based, instead it seems like moves just have cooldowns. It does allow Pokemon to actually run around the battlefield though, and I think that's really cool. It's the closest battles have ever looked so far to feeling like that out of the anime, where Pokemon are actually living beings, they aren't just standing there taking hits. Mega Revolutions are obviously back, which the trailer announces, but no new ones shown. I was kind of shocked about that. I kind of expected them to announce, yeah, Mega Revolutions are back, show the existing ones, and then show one new example at the end to be like, yeah, and there's new ones. And I kind of thought that would be Flygon to be shown, since everyone kind of expects that if there are new Mega Revolutions, which pretty much everyone expects there will be, people have Mega Flygon at the top of that list since it was revealed that, yeah, Mega Flygon was originally a planned Pokemon for X and Y. Also, still no strict release date, just a window. That gives me some hope that the game could potentially be pushed back even further if it's not living up to their standards. But I think with them giving 2025 as a release date, they're not going to push it into 2026, for example. I think if they are going to push it back, I think it'll just be pushed back from what they may be thinking internally as a release date into as late into 2025 as possible, if that should be needed. Final thing before I end the video, the Legends series looks to me like it's more experimental rather than just trying to evolve what was established in Arceus, and I do quite like that. It means that Pokemon isn't going to feel as stagnant, but I do hope some of the good stuff from Arceus really carries over, like the catching mechanics and the Pokédex tasks, because I really loved them and they were the highlight of the game for me, but I do like that they're going in a new direction with each of these, it seems. I hope you liked this more rambly video and the mic sounds good. Maybe the video won't even sound that much different from a regular video once I'm done editing the audio, but this is a video I didn't want to put a ton of time into writing and making sure I recorded each of the lines right. So hopefully this turned out okay. Anyway, that's all for this video, and until next time, bye I guess.